Exposed, the sinister curse of my forbidden lust and the spine-chilling price my son paid. The package arrived on a gloomy Tuesday, wrapped in crinkled brown paper, stamping an ominous mark on an otherwise ordinary day. Sarah's heart raced as she ripped it open, revealing an ornate vintage pendant, a family heirloom that buzzed with unseen energy. The air crackled, making her skin crawl. She could almost hear whispers emanating from the pendant, as if it had its own heartbeat. What lay buried within her family history? The once cherished heirloom felt like a harbinger of doom. In the days following its arrival, the mundane unease morphed into outright terror. Accidents began to plague the diner where she worked, plates crashed to the ground, coffee spilled all over precious morning briefings, and even her bosom friend Nancy slipped on an unseen puddle, crashing into the counter. The patrons eyed her oddly, some even murmuring about bad luck. It felt like a malignant force was haunting her. Ethan, her 10-year-old son, was the first to notice the change. One evening, as shadows crept across their living room, he looked up at her with wide, innocent eyes and whispered, "Mom, the neighbors, they're not who they seem." His voice, however soft, was laced with an intensity that chilled her bones. Sarah laughed it off then, thinking it was just a figment of his imagination, a kid's way of engaging with the world. But the feeling in her gut twisted into knots as he recited details about their neighbor's infidelities and dark secrets. After bedtime, when shadows danced in the corners of the room, Sarah would hear Ethan mumble to himself, a low murmur that suggested he conversed with something unseen. It was the space between the whispers that sent shivers down her spine. This eerie connection deepened each day, as if the pendant drew out truths best left buried. One evening, the pastor knocked on the door. Pastor Jacob, with his immaculate suit and piercing blue eyes, had always been a source of comfort in Maplewood, but tonight he emanated a different aura. "Sarah, dear," he cooed, "I've heard whispers about your boy. There's something special about him." Her stomach twisted, the smoothness of his tone more chilling than reassuring. "He could be a vessel for something beyond our understanding. Let him be a child." Sarah shot back, panic layering her voice. The pastor smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Something was off about him, she felt it like a growing storm in her chest. Unease settled over Maplewood like fog, pressing down, making respiration harder each day. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The pendant seemed to pulse like a beating heart, catching the light and casting unsettling shadows across the walls. Dread clung to her, suffocating. She recalled an old family photo she'd found amid her grandmother's possessions, faded and cracked. It revealed a shocking connection to a local legend about a curse and a mother who lost her child to a dark force. Clarity and fear struck her like a thunderbolt, pooling cold dread deep within. Desperation clawed at her as whispers grew louder outside, voices dripping with secrets. The shadows of her neighbors felt more pronounced, and Sarah could almost see them shifting, eager to watch, eager to judge. With each passing day, the tension rose, leaving her breathless. And just as she prepared to confront the unsettling truth lurking among her community, it happened. Ethan's voice echoed through the dim-lit hallway. "Mom, they know," he whispered, eyes as wide as saucers, fear etched onto his young face. In that moment, armed with nothing but a mother's fierce determination and the weight of a legacy she'd never wanted, Sarah stood on the cusp of a horrifying realization. Whatever the pendant's curse had unleashed, it was coming for them, and with it, the price would be blood. Ethan's voice fractured the silence like glass shattering, and Sarah felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "They know," he repeated, his little body trembling as he backed away from the doorway, eyes wide with terror. Panic surged through her veins, a torrent of rage and fear intertwining. "Know what, Ethan?" she demanded, her voice sharp, betraying her desperate need for clarity in the chaos. "What do they know?" But his gaze was fixed on a corner of the room where darkened shadows loomed, bending and twisting against the walls, seeming to breathe like some insidious entity. The pendant hung heavily around her neck, its presence an escalating weight. She glanced down at it, seeing the flicker of something dangerous behind its intricate design. It was not merely an heirloom anymore. It was a tether, and whatever it connected to was hungry. "Mom, the neighbors," Ethan whimpered, the words crawling painfully from his lips. "They want to take me." A shudder rolled through Sarah, cold and unsettling. She felt like a deer caught in headlights, uncertain of what to do next. The shadows in the corners crept closer, curling like tendrils around her brains, whispering secrets she didn't want to hear. She yanked the pendant from her neck, clutching it tightly. "This thing, it's causing all this. It's not just bad luck. It carries something." Her voice was barely a whisper, thick with realization. Ethan's tiny hand sought hers, gripping with an intensity that dispelled her earlier conviction to protect him at all costs. A knock on the door echoed through the grim silence, a sound that felt like doom marching in uninvited. The pastor's face filled her mind, but it wasn't just him. The silhouettes of their neighbors they were watching, lurking beyond the door, waiting for her to step outside, to abandon the fortress of her trembling sanity. "Mom, please, don't open it," Ethan cried, his voice breaking. The fear in his tone knotted in her stomach like a live wire. She hesitated, heart hammering in her chest like a death knell. But curiosity was a poison coursing through her veins, urging her to see. She had to know. With shaking hands, she approached the door, each step magnifying the gnawing anxiety swirling within. "Who is it?" she called, her voice higher than it should have been. "Sarah, it's me, Pastor Jacob," came the smooth, syrupy voice, now tinged with impatience. "I know you're home." Panic seized her as the sound of whispered voices flowed through the air, murmured phrases just beyond the threshold. It felt as if the walls closed in, trapping her breath within. Was it her imagination, or did she hear something like chanting? A wave of nausea curled in the pit of her stomach. She gripped the pendant tighter, a lifeline amidst the madness threatening to swallow her whole. "What do you want?" she shouted through the door, daring to challenge the force of whatever darkness had latched onto her family. "Just to talk, dear. Just to offer guidance," he cooed, though that sweet tone had turned rancid in her ears. The shadows scattered and converged, drawing nearer as if the very fabric of Maplewood wanted to crush her spirit. Ethereal hands seemed to reach from beyond, grazing her skin like a fleeting caress, igniting a primal instinct to flee. It dawned on her the pendant didn't just draw out secrets, it attracted something else entirely. She had to break the curse, but how? "Mom, they're coming!" Ethan shouted, his chest heaving as he yanked her back towards the living room. Suddenly, the door creaked inward, slowly opening despite her desperate grip. The pastor's gaunt silhouette loomed in the entrance, and behind him, shadows multiplied and coiled like snakes poised to strike. In that chilling moment, realization hit her like a freight train. The whispers were not just secrets. They were a call for something, a dark craving that had laid dormant for generations. As chilling laughter floated through the doorway, sounding both familiar and foreign. Sarah turned to Ethan, their eyes locking in a moment of silent terror. It was as if they stood at the edge of an abyss, staring into the darkness. She felt time suspend, leaving only one pressing thought: would they be able to escape, or had the curse finally come to collect its due? The door swung open, and with it came a wave of icy dread that swept through the room. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, a tribal drum echoing along the very marrow of her bones. The pastor stepped inside, his form outlined against the dimness outside, an unsettling grin stretched unnaturally across his face. Behind him, a seething mass of bodies blurred together, shadows flickering like flames in a tempest, undulating with a sinister rhythm as if the air itself held its breath. "Pastor Jacob," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. She felt the weight of Ethan's hand in hers, small and frantic, grounding her in this waking nightmare. She took a step back but felt the sharp edges of the room's familiarity pressing in on her. He tilted his head, eyes gleaming with a hunger that made her stomach churn. "Sarah, Dear, he said, his voice smooth and silken. This isn't just a simple visit. We want to help, you and your son. You simply don't understand the power of what you've unleashed. What do you mean? She gasped, a lump forming in her throat that threatened to choke her. Behind the pastor, murmurs rose in unison from the crowd. A chorus of low, chanting voices that twisted around her like a serpent ready to constrict. Each syllable clutched at the edges of her sanity, compelling her to listen, to understand. Ethan is special. He is chosen. The pastor's gaze dropped to her son, who quivered beside her, his face pale and frightened. Those who possess the pendant have a greater purpose, a connection to our community that runs deeper than blood. You have something that belongs to us, and in return, we seek only what is right. No. Sarah's voice cracked, her world spinning as if she were trapped in a cyclone of emotions. You can't take him. Not from me. Suddenly, Ethan screamed, and the sound ricocheted off the walls like a shot in the dark. He jerked away from her, breaking her hold. Mom, help. His small frame darted backward, straight toward the encroaching shadows. Panic surged in Sarah as she lunged forward, grasping for him amidst the chaos. Stay back. She shouted at the pastor, who only laughed, a horrible, echoing sound that sent chills racing down her spine. The sinister gathering seemed animated now, their heads bobbing as one, eyes glimmering with anticipation like predators spotting their prey. A palpable energy filled the air, pressed against her skin like the pulse of a heartbeat, thrumming with dark promise. Join us, Sarah, the pastor urged, extending a hand toward her. Your strength will aid us. Your son is a vessel for forces beyond your comprehension. This is his fate, and yours. No. She felt sheer terror clawing at her throat. Alone, she was a mother fighting for her child, but the shadows were growing closer, their whispers louder, as if they fed on her fear. Her grasp on reality wavered, flickering like a dying candle in the face of a windstorm. The pendant around her neck pulsed, a living heartbeat against her chest. In this moment, clarity cut through the darkness, a flicker of hope that was but a thorn amid the chaos. She had something they wanted. The power within the pendant could either save or doom them. With a deep breath, she locked eyes with Ethan, determination slicing through her fear. We're going to run, Ethan. On 3. Mom. He looked confused, but she saw a spark of trust ignite behind the terror. 1, 2. With a rush, she reached for the pendant, gripping it with all the strength she had. Just as she counted 3, a cacophony of whispers crescendoed, and hands cold and insistent shot toward them. Sarah pulled Ethan into her arms and surged forward, desperate to breach the encroaching shadows, the entire world narrowing to that single, heart-pounding moment. Run! She screamed. But before they could escape, a shriek erupted from the crowd, freezing them in place. Someone had broken ranks, stumbling forward with an outstretched hand, fingers clawing in desperate need. A face emerged from the murky darkness. It was a neighbor, someone once friendly, now draped in malevolence, and then came the whisper, chilling and clear, as if spoken directly into her core, "You can't run. You belong to us now." Fear paralyzed her, coating her skin in ice. In that instant, she realized there was nowhere left to go. The shadows had teeth. What would she sacrifice to save Ethan? What was their fate if they couldn't fight this dark tide? As the shadows surged forward, Sarah's heart pounded with the realization that they were not just facing their neighbors. They were up against an ancient hunger, one that would not rest until they were claimed. And as they stood there, clinging to each other amidst the unfolding nightmare, it became all too clear, something was coming for them, and time was running out. The shadows lunged, their cold fingers grazing Sarah's arms like 1,000 icy daggers. She could feel the energy around her, a growing malevolence that wrapped tighter with every passing second. It tugged at her soul, urging her to surrender. But she wouldn't. Not yet. Ethan. She pulled him close, trying to shield him from the frenzy looming before them. Her heart raced, a wild drumbeat pounding against her ribs. The voices crackled like static in her ears, chanting words she wished she could unhear. They echoed in disturbing harmony, a twisted lullaby of despair and dread. "Mom, I'm scared," Ethan cried, his small body trembling against her. She could feel his fear, raw and electrifying, coursing through her like a disease. "I know, baby, I know," she whispered, her voice breaking. The pastor was still there, grinning, his eyes glistening with a dark kind of glee. "Time is running out," he crooned, his words slithering around her. "Join us willingly, or take your place among those who resist. You have what is ours, and we will not be denied." As if to punctuate his promise, the chanting grew louder, the crowd shuddering forward like an ocean wave ready to crash. The room felt smaller, the shadows stretching, reaching, their hunger palpable. Sarah's thoughts raced. She needed a plan, an exit. "Ethan, stay close," she ordered, clutching the pendant. Its warmth became a beacon amidst the cold. With a deep breath, Sarah began to back away, pulling Ethan with her. "We're going to get out of here, just follow my lead," she said, each word becoming a prayer. "Where are you going?" Pastor Jacob's voice rose over the chaos, cutting through the noise with a sharp chill. "You can't escape your fate. You're bound to return." But retreat was their only hope. Clenching the pendant tightly, she focused on breathing, desperate for clarity amidst the noise. Maybe it had power she could wield, perhaps it could protect them if used correctly. "Now!" she shouted, ripping them away from the suffocating shadows. They surged forward, but the crowd shifted to block their path, shadows pulling together and forming a barrier of darkness. "Stop them!" the pastor commanded, voice rolling like thunder. Ethan squealed, a terrified cry that sliced through Sarah's resolve. A blur of cold bodies surged toward them, hands reaching with malevolent intent. For a heartbeat that stretched into eternity, fear gripped her like a vice, then inspiration struck like a lightning bolt. "Ethan!" The pendant. Without hesitating, she lifted it high, feeling its warmth radiate into the chaos. "I command you." The words burst forth, fueled by desperation. "I command you back." The shadows halted, recoiling like a snake in daylight. Confusion erupted within the mob, collective gasps reverberating against the walls. She could sense their surprise, a moment of hesitation that felt almost like victory, but it was fleeting. The pastor's face twisted with rage, fury, and hunger converging to form a storm. "You dare to challenge us?" His voice dripped with venom. "You will pay for this transgression." Eyes flaring with anger, the shadows streaked forward again, more frantic, more desperate. "Run, Ethan!" Her voice broke again, louder this time. "Don't look back." They darted toward the door, hearts pounding a frantic rhythm. But what awaited them beyond the threshold? Would they truly break free, or had they only traded one nightmare for another? Just as they reached the door, a hand clutched at Sarah's ankle, sending her tumbling forward. She landed hard, the breath knocked from her lungs. "Mom!" Ethan cried, panic flooding his small voice. The moment felt suspended in time, the shadows hovered closer, whispers clawing at her mind. Now, on the ground, she became keenly aware of a creeping coldness that settled deep in her bones. The pendant glimmered through the chaos, reflecting her sheer terror. In that moment of despair, the air thickened with expectancy, and Sarah knew the shadows were not just after Ethan, they were after her. What had she awakened? What darkness lay ahead? The crowd surged, and the whispering crescendoed, drowning her thoughts. It wasn't over. She felt it, the unsettling certainty creeping over her. "Mom!" Ethan's voice cracked above the cacophony, and as darkness wrapped around them both, time seemed to stop. What horror was ready to unfold, and would they survive long enough to find out? The darkness swallowed them whole, a thick veil of shadow that whispered promises of despair. Sarah stumbled, gasping for breath, each inhale laced with the chilling scent of mildew and decay. The ground beneath her felt alive, pulsating, as if the very earth wanted to consume them. "Get up, please." Ethan's voice cracked, panic weaving through his words. He tugged at her sleeve, his small hands trembling with urgency. She blinked against the dark, struggling to collect her thoughts. The pendant still glowed faintly in her grip, casting a warm, feeble light that was barely enough to pierce the oppressive gloom. She levered herself onto her knees, urgency pressing against her chest like a weight. "Ethan, hold my hand." He surged forward, grasping her fingers with a grip so tight it sent sparks of warmth through her. Together, they were a fragile light in an encroaching abyss. As they scrambled to their feet, the shadows quivered then surged. A mass of darkness writhed, tendrils reaching out for them like the hungry arms of the damned. Every heartbeat pounded like a war drum, echoing terror in the cavernous void. "Run!" Sarah shouted, desperate urgency ripping her voice. They bolted forward, the two of them leading a frantic sprint towards the door now far behind them. But the ground shifted. It felt as if the room itself turned against them, trapping them in a spiraling maw. Ethan stumbled on something unseen, pulling Sarah down with him. The heat of their bodies contrasted sharply with the cold that surrounded them, grounding them in shared dread. She could feel it, the darkness beckoning, whispering sweet nothings meant to lure them into submission. "Mom, it's everywhere," Ethan gasped, eyes wide with horror. "I know. But we can't stop, Ethan." She managed to push him up, heart racing as panic spurred her on. "We just have to keep moving. We'll find a way out." They found themselves in what seemed to be a corridor, walls lined with creeping shadows that flickered like candle flames caught in the wind. Terrifying faces twisted in agony emerged from the depths, mere silhouettes etched in despair. It felt like running through a nightmare where every corner turned deepened the terror. Where do we go?" Ethan's voice quivered, dread creeping into his heart as he looked up at her, wide and desperate. But Sarah shook her head, feeling trapped, paralyzed by the fear creeping deeper. I don't know, just keep moving." She turned, facing the corridor that twisted like a serpent, stretching into insurmountable gloom. Each step felt haunted, with shadows lurking just beyond their reach, then a surge echoed from behind, a low, guttural growl that sent ice shooting down her spine. The pastor's voice rang out, cold and mocking, a death knell drowning her hope. "You think you can escape the power that binds you? You will see. You will all see." Ethan whimpered at the edge of her vision, his small frame dwarfed by the looming dread. She gritted her teeth, forgotten questions raging in her mind. What did they want? Why her? With resolve igniting her, she shouted into the darkness. "Stay back. Don't you dare touch my son." The shadows hesitated, recoiling slightly, as if her words held some power over them. "Mom! Look!" Ethan pointed ahead. There, at the end of the corridor, a glimmer, a door, hazy but flickering with golden light. It was a beacon, shiny and inviting and absolutely terrifying. "Is it safe?" he pleaded, a breathless tremor escaping him. She opened her mouth to reply, but hesitation clawed at her throat. They ran, feet pounding against the ancient floor as shadows clawed their way closer. With each step toward the door, the temperature dropped, freezing air biting at their skin. "Almost there," she urged, adrenaline sharpening her senses. Shadows pressed closer, whispering doubts that twisted in knots around her heart. But finally, they reached the door and she pushed it open, the light spilling forth in a blinding wave. "Go! Go!" she shouted, shoving Ethan through. But as her foot crossed the threshold, something icy shot through her, a grip stronger than any fear she had ever known. In an instant, Ethan was pulled away, wrenched back from the blinding light into the shadows. "Mom! No!" She lunged forward, but the shadows swarmed, clamping down around her like shackles. As she reached out, panic surging in her veins, a dreadful realization crept in. This was the price. Would they ever escape? And as the screams echoed within the walls, something sinister whispered back from the depths. Was this the beginning of their end? Or merely the start of something far worse? The shadows dragged Sarah back, their icy fingers around her throat, squeezing as cold tendrils coiled around her body. She clawed at the darkness, desperate, but it wrapped tighter, a noose of despair. Ethan! She cried again, the sound swallowed by the void, her throat raw with panic. In her mind, the image of her son's terrified face loomed, etched with a fear that twisted her heart. She had failed him. The light behind her flickered, casting erratic shadows that contorted like wailing souls. The door slowly began to close, creaking ominously, sealing her fate. The warmth of the light was gone, extinguished by the ravenous hunger of the dark. But then, flickers of memories rose to the surface, piercing through her terror. The pendant in her grasp pulsed, a heartbeat in the gloom. She focused, drawing on the warmth it had once shared, a mere ember against the consuming shadows. "Ethan, I'm coming!" she shouted, wrapping her will around the glowing light. With a fierce determination, she pulled herself forward, pushing against the crushing weight of darkness that fought to drag her down. Anguished cries erupted from unseen mouths, but she pushed through, fueled by a desperate need for him. She envisioned his face, the way his laughter lit up their home, a beacon against the encroaching dread. Suddenly, she tore free, stumbling into the room she had just abandoned. The door slammed shut behind her, sealing off the shadows with a resounding finality. Panting, she turned to face the room, a familiar sight that now pulsed with a grotesque rhythm. The walls were lined with twisting shadows, faces morphing, their agony an echo in the silence. "Mom!" Ethan's small voice echoed softly, sending shivers down her spine. She whipped around, spotting him in the center of the room, bathed in an unfamiliar, flickering light. His eyes reflected both fear and confusion, and he stood trapped in a swirling mass of fog, thick and dark. "Ethan! Don't move!" She darted towards him, heart pounding. But the moment she took a step, the ground quaked beneath her. The shadows roared to life, lunging toward them, but this time they were different, angry and primal. "Stay back!" she yelled, holding the pendant up, its glow shifting, battling the darkness. The shadows hesitated, writhing at the edge of the light. But she could feel their pull, trying to snatch her son away. Desperation thickened in her throat. "Mom, help me!" Ethan shouted as the fog twisted around him, threatening to swallow him whole. "Hold on!" She lunged forward but felt the air shift, heavy and thick like a blanket of fog wrapping around her. Then, the ground erupted beneath her, a cavity opening like a maw prepared to swallow the world whole. Sarah stumbled, fighting against the pull, but it was relentless. The shadows were no longer mere forms, they were entities with a will of their own, intent on dragging them into the abyss. "Leave him alone!" she screamed, gaze piercing the darkness. But instead of retreating, the shadows converged tighter, swelling with pride, mocking her. "This power cannot be contained." A cold voice snickered from the void. Summoning every ounce of strength left in her, Sarah braced herself, feeling the pendant burn in her hand, its glow more intense, illuminating not just her surroundings but her resolve. "You won't take him. I'll fight for my son." With one final burst of energy, she lunged into the fray, the pendant lighting the way, a solitary star in the black. But as she reached out to grab Ethan, an overwhelming force slammed against her, the shadows tightened around her, too strong, too many. The room shook violently, as though the world itself was in turmoil, swallowing laughter and cries in unison. "No!" she gasped, pulling on every thread of hope she had left, but at that moment, a chilling realization clawed at her gut. Would the shadows let go? Or had they come for something far worse? As the dark closed in, suffocating her both in body and spirit, a swirling vortex of memories emerged around her, a final chance to reclaim her son or condemn him to a fate worse than death. The shadows whispered promises of darkness, "Join us, and you can be together forever." And as those words lingered in the air, the pendant flickered erratically. What would she choose? Would she surrender to darkness or fight one last time against the overwhelming tide? Fear fueled her desperation, coursing through her like fire. As the shadows constricted tighter, Sarah's vision blurred, the darkness threatening to smother everything she held dear. She could see Ethan, a flicker of light in the storm, his small form lost in the whirl of shadows, with no hope but her. Get away from him! She shrieked, the words clawing out of her throat like a wounded animal. The pendant pulsed, its soft glow flickering against the inky blackness, illuminating the wavering expressions of tormented souls caught in the shadows. They hovered nearby, drawn by her anger, a sickening mockery of what was once beautiful. Mom! Ethan cried again, terror splintering his voice. Each call was a shard burying deep into her heart. Hold on, Ethan! She shouted, even as she felt the icy fingers of the dark tugging at her feet, attempting to ensnare her. The deeper she plunged into the shadows, the heavier the weight of despair wrapped around her. Fueled by a surge of adrenaline, Sarah lunged forward. She felt the ground tremble beneath her. The walls vibrated with the cries of the trapped, a chorus begging for release. She pushed through, her eyes locked onto Ethan, desperation morphing into a primal instinct, but the shadows were not just a collection of darkness, they were alive, thrumming with malicious energy. They responded to her movements, coiling tighter, rooting her in place. And with every attempt to reach her son, the pendant's light began to die, its warmth fading like a heartbeat losing strength. I won't let you take him! She screamed, determined not to be their prisoner. The shadows hissed, an ominous sound, slithering closer. You must choose, a voice whispered, sultry and dark, wrapping around her like a serpent. Embrace us or lose him forever. In that moment, a glimmer of doubt crept in, gnawing at her resolve. What if she was too late? What if the darkness had already consumed the joy that was once her life? But those thoughts were quickly swept away by the image of Ethan's face, wide eyes searching for her, a child who believed she could save him. With a defiant yell, Sarah clutched the pendant tighter. I choose light. She declared, letting the energy of her love flood through her, igniting the pendant anew. A brilliant light burst forth, pushing back against the shadows as they recoiled with howls of rage. The light swallowed the room, dispelling the fog, yanking Ethan from its grasp. He stumbled forward, confusion and relief mingling in his eyes. Mom! He cried, arms outstretched. But the shadows weren't done. They wailed, their anguish mixing with the sounds of horror surrounding them. Sarah felt the ground beneath her crack and shift, as if reality was tearing apart. Run, Ethan! Get out! She shouted, forcing her feet to move toward him, but the darkness surged again, relentless and monstrous, trying to reclaim what it lost. Suddenly, she felt a squeeze around her ankle, a phantom grip pulling her backward into the chaos. No! She screamed, the fear clawing deep as she fought to maintain her footing. The faces in the shadows twisted, their mouths moving silently, trying to drown out her will, but she wouldn't let them win. Not now. With an inspired surge of resolve, she directed the light of the pendant towards the shadows, willing it to break their vile hold. It glowed ferociously, illuminating the room and burning bright against the consuming dark. Just as she felt hope rising, a blinding flash erupted from the pendant, blinding her. Mom! Ethan's cry cut through the chaos just before silence fell. Then everything went dark. Alone in her thoughts, a chill washed over Sarah. Had she failed him? Where was he? A cold fear gripped her heart as whispers began to resonate in the void surrounding her. You'll always be ours, they echoed, a taunting promise that sent her mind spiraling. In the darkness, she felt an insidious presence drawing closer, ready to make her see what lay beyond. What awaited her would test her resolve and lead her to the truth behind their connection to the shadows. Sarah's heartbeat echoed in the suffocating silence, a drum against the oppressive darkness. It was all-consuming, wrapping around her throat like a vice, squeezing until her lungs burned for air. She felt weightless, as if floating in a void, yet the shadows were alive, whispering her name, taunting her with the memories of what she cherished most. Ethan! Her voice was a mere whisper, fading into the abyss. Panic seized her chest, squeezing tighter with every heartbeat. Each second felt like a lifetime, each moment a reminder of her failure. Where was her son? Suddenly, she felt a cool breath at her ear, chilling her to the bone. "You're not alone, Sarah." The voice was seductive, dripping with a dark promise that sent electric shocks of dread through her. It had a familiarity to it, laced with deception. In an instinctual reaction, she swung her arms through the air, desperate to find something solid to grasp. But her fingers met nothing but the thick fog of despair. Shadows pressed closer, outlining monstrous shapes that whispered secrets she didn't want to hear. Dark tendrils brushed against her skin, teasing and pulling, beckoning her further into their grasp. "Come home, Sarah," the voice crooned, caressing her name like a lover's hand. "Leave the pain behind. Join us never." She spat, forcing the words through gritted teeth. Valuing the flickering memory of Ethan's laughter, she could not yield, not now. Clutching the pendant against her chest, she felt its warmth fade as the shadows clawed at her resolve. Images flashed before her mind. Ethan's smile, the way he'd dance around the living room, how he'd curl up next to her at night, safety in his small frame. They were all worth the fight, they always had been. "Ethan!" She yelled again, voice raw and desperate, fueled by an overwhelming surge of love. Then, something shifted. A flicker of light pierced the oppressive gloom. She stumbled toward it, drawn by an unseen force. Each step pushed against the weight of anguish pressing down on her. Slowly, shadows retreated, revealing the outline of a door, its surface weathered but familiar. "Mom." Ethan's voice floated toward her, fragile and uncertain. It filled her with nauseating hope. She rushed toward the sound, the light growing brighter with every step she took. "Ethan, I'm here. I'm coming." But as she reached for the handle, a sharp pain shot through her chest. She looked down to see a shadowy hand emerging from the floor, its fingers sinking deep into her flesh, anchoring her in a grasp far worse than any physical bind. "No!" She cried out, feeling the darkness clawing at her heart, siphoning her strength. With a fierce resolve, she turned the pendant to face the darkness and saw it flicker hesitantly. Each heartbeat synchronized with the struggle around her. "I choose light." She screamed, pouring every ounce of strength, every emotion into the pendant. Light surged forth, illuminating the room, but the shadows writhed in resistance, painting the walls with jagged silhouettes. "Foolish woman! You cannot escape." The voices shrieked, their joy evident in the chaos they created. They encircled her, a storm of dread and despair. But Sarah kept her focus sharp, determined to break the sinister hold, but with a sudden jolt, the ground beneath her feet crumbled away, revealing an abyss that threatened to swallow her whole. As she fell deeper into the void, Ethan's face rushed to her mind, driving her determination to the edge. "Mom!" His voice was so near and yet so far. The last thing she glimpsed was the light, flickering, fighting against the cascade of darkness, trying to reach her. Then, she was enveloped in chaos. When the dust settled, she found herself standing alone in a barren landscape, shadows writhing but no longer surrounding her. Ethan's cries echoed faintly, reverberating against the dark sky. She felt a darkness in this place, a weight that pressed against her thoughts. How long had she been lost? Was this her punishment? But before she could dwell on it, a looming figure emerged from the darkness, a familiar silhouette. "Mom," the figure whispered, but it wasn't Ethan's voice. It was darker, wrapped in malice and filled with foreboding. "Who are you?" It was instinct to be afraid, but the fear was dulled by a wave of recognition. The figure stepped into the light, revealing a twisted version of the son she loved. "You should have embraced the dark." Gasping, Sarah stumbled back. Everything turned icy, the abyss still haunted by shadows that breathed with the rhythm of her panic. What had she truly awakened? What was she going to lose next? Sarah's breath quickened, terror creeping up her spine like a frigid hand grasping at her very soul. "Ethan?" she faltered, her voice barely a whisper. The being before her was a grotesque mimicry, a paragon of everything she clung to in the dark, now encased in shadows that twisted and contorted with malicious intent. The resemblance was undeniable, but the eyes, those weren't Ethan's bright, innocent eyes. Instead, they were hollow, devoid of warmth, swirling with shadows that danced like demons in an infernal ballet. "Mom," it said, slick with a sinister syrup, "I waited for you. All this time, I thought you'd come." "No," she gasped, stepping back, heart hammering in her chest. "You're not him." The figure laughed, a sound that sent shivers rippling through the air, thick with malice. "But aren't I? I've been here, growing, waiting for your choice. The darkness offers such freedom, Mom. Why don't you just let it in? Embrace it. Join me." Sarah stumbled backward again, trying to shake off the tightness in her throat, the overwhelming urge to believe this twisted creature. "I will never join you," she shouted, the words echoing against the barren landscape, resonating with her resolve. "Foolish woman," it hissed, voice twisting into a serpentine mockery. "You can't escape the bargain you made. You dug this grave, and now it's time to lie in it." A cold sweat trickled down Sarah's back, the weight of despair closing in more tightly than ever. The shadows around her began to pulse and throb like a heart, drawing closer, whispering her fears. She felt their icy hands crawling up her ankles, latching onto her skin. The whispers became a cacophony, warping into horrible echoes of Ethan's laughter, blending with cries that morphed into laughter, and then into silence. "Don't you want to see him again?" The twisted figure stepped forward, grin stretching too wide, exposing teeth that were sharp, glistening with malice. "He's waiting, you just need to give in. Leave him alone," she screamed, clutching her pendant. The warmth surged in response, igniting a flicker of courage. The darkness snarled, recoiling like a wounded animal. "That pendant won't save you. It's the source of your anguish. Without it, you can be free." "Free?" Sarah laughed bitterly, an ember of defiance igniting within her. "You think I would surrender my heart for your false freedom?" The creature lunged, shadows swirling madness around it, closing in. In that moment, Sarah felt a fierce wind rip through the landscape, tearing the shadows apart. Frantically, she surged forward, running toward the dark figure that claimed to be Ethan. "I will find you. I will bring you home." But the ground shifted beneath her, fracturing into jagged chasms as the shadows whispered her name again, promising pain, seducing her with visions of comfort. "You can't outrun this, Sarah." The creature growled, reforming in front of her, its form flickering between her son's essence and the abhorrent monster it had become. Stay with us." In the distance, she could see light flickering again, beckoning her through the chaos. Desperation surged within, grounding her. "I will fight for him," she vowed. "No matter what it takes." With that thought, she closed her eyes, focusing each heartbeat into the pendant. The light radiated outward, so alive, a beacon of her love pushing against the darkness. The shadows shrieked, thrashing around her, fighting to snuff out that brilliance. "Where is Ethan?" Sarah shouted, desperation crackling through her voice. The shadows shivered, coiling around her, resisting, but she steeled herself against the engulfing dread. Something shifted within her, a choice that surged through the light. "I won't let you take him from me." But just as the darkness sputtered under the push of light energy, a sinister chuckle filled the air, overwhelming her. "You cannot grasp what awaits you. Seasoned with your fears, the true price of love." The air thickened, reality cracking around her edges. Through the veil of shadows, she glimpsed the door again, the flicker of hope dancing beyond the despair. Could she reach it? And then, silence as shadows swirled, enclosing her in an embrace of fear, a loud thud resonated. From the depths of darkness came a voice, deeper and more sinister than before. I'm closer than you think. Fear shot through her veins like ice water. Could it? Is that really you? She called out, doubt creeping back under her skin as she fought to remain rooted in defiance. And as the answer lurked in the dark, she could only wonder, had she made a terrible mistake, or was there still time to save her son? The shadows shifted, swirling ominously, waiting. Panic charged the air as the shadows tightened around Sarah, encasing her in an oppressive embrace. She could hear Ethan's cries echoing in the distance, each call breaking through the heavy darkness like a distant lighthouse beacon. Mom, help! His voice wove through her, laced with pure desperation. It ignited a fire within her that refused to be extinguished. With trembling resolve, Sarah clenched the pendant against her chest, its warmth spreading through her like a shield. I will find you, Ethan. She called into the void, her voice carrying the weight of fierce motherly love. The shadows hesitated, retracting slightly, as if they felt the power behind her words. Fight with me. She shouted, drawing strength from her memories of him, the sound of his laughter, the way he snuggled close after nightmares. Each thought became fuel, an ember igniting into a raging inferno of determination. The pendant pulsed with renewed energy, glowing brighter, illuminating the swirling darkness around her. Let him go. Sarah demanded, voice steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. The shadows responded with a cacophony of chaotic whispers, voices twisting and mocking, all urging her to give in. You're too weak, they cooed, sly voices slithering into her ears. You have already lost. No. Sarah clenched her teeth, pushing back against the tide of despair that threatened to pull her under, and then, she saw it, a flicker of light piercing the darkness, beckoning her with all its might. Ethan. She surged toward it, fighting through the swirling shadows that reached out hungrily, aiming to ensnare her again. Stay with me. She screamed, tears streaming down her face as she raced towards the beacon of hope. Suddenly, the twisted figure manifested again from the shadows, a grotesque reflection of her son. Why fight, Sarah? It sneered, menacingly. Join us, and we won't just be together, we will thrive. Give in to the darkness. You are not my son. She yelled, plunging forward as the light grew brighter, revealing the door once more. Get away from Ethan. With the pendant radiating warmth, Sarah felt her grounded belief shatter the darkness. She lunged forward, reaching for the glowing portal. I will save him. She cried. Just as the shadows lunged to reclaim her, she leapt through the shimmering light, and everything shattered with a deafening implosion. Time stood still as the darkness screamed in outrage, ripping apart at the seams. Sarah closed her eyes, bracing for impact, but as she opened them, the shadows peeled back, revealing a warm, golden light that enveloped her in a comforting embrace. Ethan stood before her, relief flooding his eyes. Mom! He ran into her, every ounce of fear melting away as he wrapped his small arms around her. Jumbled emotions flooded through her: love, fear, and a visceral acknowledgement of all they had sacrificed. I thought I lost you. Sarah gasped, tears spilling over, mingling with the laughter they shared. I will always find you, Ethan assured, squeezing her tighter. In that moment, together they stood, the shadows receding into nothingness, their power defeated by the strength of their bond. The pendant still pulsated softly in Sarah's grip, a symbol of trials faced and overcome. Lessons learned. Together, they took a step forward. The bright light illuminated the pathway ahead, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, they breathed in the fresh air, free from the clutches of darkness. As they emerged into the sunlight, the weight of the past began to lift. Sarah glanced down at the pendant in her palm, knowing it would always remain a part of their story. We did it, Ethan. We faced the shadows and conquered them. Yes, Mom. And we can do anything together. He beamed. They walked toward the horizon, hearts entwined, ready for whatever adventures awaited them next. The shadows they faced became more than harbingers of doom. They transformed into lessons of trust, love, and the unwavering bond between a mother and her child, and as they disappeared from view, the peacefulness of the world settled in. reassuring them that they would never have to face the darkness alone again. That if this story gripped your heart and made you feel alive, you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support and smash the like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments with your reactions and theories about this thrilling conclusion. And don't wait even one more second, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this riveting end. The time to act is now. Only true fans understand how vital your support is. Let us keep this narrative alive.